Hey, everybody. I am really beyond measure excited for the opportunity to present my longtime friend, Eva Crawford. Eva, thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah. Eva, I'm going to gush. I don't want her to turn red, but Eva is a design genius who, in my estimation, captures the heart, soul, and spirit of Los Angeles, uh, is a consummate professional who's done amazing work. And as I'm certain you all will agree, when you watch this presentation. And so, Eva, I asked to produce a logo for Zennie62Media when we were becoming a corporation. And this is what she made. And she hit it out of the park. And the reason is that when I instantly saw it, I just went nutso because, in a good way, by the way, you can go nutso in a bad way. But this captured immediately what we do. We vlog, we're vloggers. And we capture the world around us and we present it as news in this format and this name that I came up with in 2010 to start my own media company as a way of giving the finger at SF Gate, which is another story. So Eva captured perfectly what we're about, and I want to just thank you for that. Backstage we were talking about it, and I was saying to her, the best work comes as a stream of consciousness. And Eva, I just want to thank you.
Well, I'm glad it's serving your needs. I wish I had a better memory of actually making it. However, I can't claim like some kind of grand insight on this one. I think it was a matter of necessity when it was made.
Yeah, and you did a fantastic job, and that gets us to talk about you. And how did you get into this? How did you get started? Because we'd love to hear that and others.
I had a pretty circuitous journey to where I live today as a designer. The design field has changed dramatically too. So when I first started my career, I actually did not aspire to be an art director designer. That wasn't really what I was interested in. When I started my career, it was you know, the zenith of optimism of the internet, if that makes sense. It was the late 90s,
Mhm.
and it's where we thought information was going to save us all, right? So I was a lot more interested in multimedia. And I think if I had been born 5 years later, I would have landed in experiential design. That's where I would have lived. And that's actually where my good friend Jenny like operates her day to day. And if you don't know what experiential is, that means that you're designing spaces for people to like have an experience, right?
Hmm.
So, it can be used on the corporate level. You see it a lot in museums. They're immersive. That's the whole intent.
Is
And
that? Let me.
sometimes now there's like popular culture things, like you can go buy tickets to see some amazing installation like out in a like museum park or inside of a zoo, right? And they'll do like this whole storyline experiential,
Let me ask you. Is that something like what one would do, say, if they work for WED Enterprises, Ultralights Disney Enterprises, that produces the
Yeah,
ride? Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
because I
That's
wanted to
like,
work for them. That's
yeah, absolutely. So then you're looking more on the entertainment side of like theme park experiential, right? So the kids might interact with screens or they pipe in music and, so it's like a combination of variables. It's not just one item. It's not just the screens. It's not just the sounds and, even scents. Like if you'll pay attention now that you're aware of this, if you go to a hotel, sometimes you'd be like, wow, it smells amazing in here. That's
yeah.
very intentional. They're building an environment, you know.
Huh. When did that start? I just don't. I mean, I'm curious because here's why I'm going with that.
Theme parks probably were the nascent forerunner. If I had to guess, I'd have to like confer with a few of my friends who spend their day-to-day operations in theme park design and things like that. But I personally would credit theme parks with starting that, and notably Disney, of course. They always talk about the ride line at Disney, right?
Mhm.
Where there's enough stuff happening around you to make the whole experience of waiting 2 hours in line less arduous, right?
Yeah.
So Yeah. So, I started my career aspiring to be a multimedia designer, right? At the time, that meant you were authoring CD-ROMs on an old Macromedia program called Director. Um, Man, I really dated myself there. But in any case, that's how I started. But when I moved to Los Angeles, I really had to start from zero. Um, I got a great contract with Raytheon, and I worked in their media department. And it was, about as dry as you might anticipate working in defense contracting would be. There was a lot of corporate video. There was a lot of cutting things together so they could show to their partners. Every once in a while we got to do something kind of entertaining and fun and more entertainment driven. But when that contract ended, I was kind of at an impasse because I had made a conclusion that I did not want to work in corporate video media, because by that time that's where I was ever again. I was like this. And so I took a huge pay cut. I got a job in packaging for a consumer products company. I got paid like half what I got paid in defense. And yeah, at the time I didn't care because I thought I was going to live forever. So it didn't matter. But yeah, so I cut my teeth there on packaging, and then I continued to move more directly into design. And I've worked for any number of clients since that time. When I left the consumer products company, I had enough clients to go freelance, and that seemed to be the way to go at the time. What I did not know was that the recession was going to hit. So that was a really, really bad year after the dawn of the recession. So, and it took about 10 years to recover, like many of my compatriots from that time. But since then, I've slowly built a client base. My clients range from the Riverside Art Museum and the Cheech to OCVIBes, which is a new hyper development. It's billions of dollars. It's really exciting. And artists, chefs, graffiti artists. Yeah, the whole gamut.
And how would you describe your style?
As a designer, I do not consider myself to have a strict style. I am somewhat of a formalist when it comes to typography. I really believe that there's a reason a lot of typography rules exist. I'm not designing for design's sake. I'm designing to solve a problem. So when I have meetings with clients and it's a more creative project, there's still stakeholders that have to weigh in and be satisfied. And that's crucial. Because if you're just designing for yourself, you're not solving the need on the table.
And what do you think? What is the most challenging project you've ever had? And we have some exhibits behind us, but what's the one project that you believe best captures your effort, your work, your genius, your foresight? What are you most proud of?
Well, I never classify myself as a genius. I'd like to put that out there. You can call me whatever you like. I mean, you're entitled to your freedom of speech, but I consider myself a problem solver.
Unknown caller.
Um,
That was me. That's gone.
I cannot think of a singular project. However, I did give you a sample of a cookbook that I designed. And I would say, if you are to give me free reign, that is the kind of content I will design. I have a copy of that behind me too, right in front of me. And I can show you a few spreads in real time. Like, that client really trusted me to build her vision. Yeah. It's much more impressive in person. Let me pull the copy. One sec.
Sure. I love the whole. You talked about immersive experiences. Just I feel like I'm being immersed into an experience, but with this page.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the food photographer for this particular volume was extraordinary. She's really, really brilliant. So not only did she style sets for the food and choose the dishware and so forth with the
Let's give
client.
it a solo layout. Wow.
But But yeah, it's a really, really, really beautiful volume. And the chef's name is Mina Abdi. She does not have a restaurant, but she's French trained. She's classically French trained. And she has this great backstory where she herself is Persian, but wants to fuse her knowledge of French cooking with her Persian background. So the cookbook is this great synergy of like dishes that she makes for her family, that's part of her culture, and things that she was trained to make in France, right? So just truly, she's one of the loveliest persons I've ever had the privilege of working for. But her photographer really honored her heritage. Like, when I see the pistachios here, and
Wow.
we went to the diligence to bring in like Persian poets like Hafiz who speak to Persian culture. So,
Mhm.
and this mark on the front is a
Hold a little higher.
direct lift from a
Hold
sculpture
a
that
little
still
higher.
lives in Persia,
If
right?
it's possible, you hold it a little higher there.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a little bit more, so you can see the bottom of that
It looks like
book.
it's cutting off on my end, but maybe it's not.
Oh, not quite. Just a little higher.
Okay.
Uh,
Anyway,
yeah.
it's incidental. But yeah, so this title also is referential to her experience because I don't know if
That,
people know this, but Syrah and Shiraz is in fact the same thing. It just
that's a
depends on what
gorgeous.
region you're consuming it.
That's a gorgeous book. My
It's pretty
goodness. That
nice. Yeah. Yeah, it's available on Amazon. You can easily find it. It's a great volume and really beautiful photography and backstory.
how, Eva, how does your design process work? And what I mean by that is when you start from scratch,
Yeah. Can you
from A
pull
to
up that job board that went with the cookbook and I can kind of show you
sure,
like what my
absolutely.
client conversations look like.
Yeah.
There's another photograph that came over with this project and it
Oh,
looks like a
sure.
mess. It just looks like a bunch of thumbnails, right?
Okay, let me get that one for you. Let's see here. Stop screen, present, share. And is that the file called cover, Saraz? I have
I think
let
you just pulled up cover, but
me
it
try
should
this.
be
No, I
evident
got
on
it. This one. Bing.
yeah.
That one.
So this is a great example of after a client contracts me, how we start a conversation.
Hmm.
And in this case, it was quite prescriptive and not in a bad way, but we knew that we wanted to integrate both French and Persian culture. So what I'm doing here is having a conversation with the client, like, here's what I'm seeing. I'm pulling these classic French influences along with the Persian. And what we're doing here is we're looking for through lines. What threads connect between the two cultures? That includes color, design details, patterns. So we're having a conversation between us both. And we were talking about going a couple of different directions, like, in the beginning, where we were going to go more modern and more formal, right? Where it looked like it's more contemporary. But Mina is older and she decided that she really wanted something that looked kind of classic and formal and traditional. So, but these early conversations typically look like this, where we're like looking for influence, talking about the rationale behind the influence. And so up in the top, that little black mark is what Mina originally submitted for the sculpture that still exists in ancient Persia. It's still something you can go visit in Persia today. So, and then of course, at the point in this board, like the span of this board is several weeks for clarity. Like this didn't happen in a day, right? So, but the final mark that I refined is this one that sits over to the right. So it's got some degree of chronology here where we're talking about what's happening in process. But when I start a client project, when there's creative elements like this, sometimes projects are not always that creative. They're more clinical, right? So if I have a client called Echem Expo, they do an exposition every 2 years, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's collection of scientists and thought leaders, right, working on chemical affairs, right? So, and it's some of these large players, but everything for that project is quite academic. You know, there's a program guide and there's wayfinding signage to show everybody where the conferences are and things like that. You're not going to have a conversation like this, right? Like for that, it's like, what do people know? When do they need to know it? Where do we need to put the signage? You know, what information do we need to include to inform everybody on the website and on the collateral? But in the case of like Mina's project or the things for OCVIBes, it's more of this fusion. You know, with Mina, it's like artist to artist. With Echem Expo, it's artist to executives, plural. When I work with OCVIBes, it's artist to executive creative team, right? So, you know, these relationships and discussions change depending on the dynamic and who you have to satisfy in the end product.
So how do you, one of my, when I was in architecture school, favorite books was The Fountainhead. And Howard Rourke was one of my favorite characters. For two reasons. A, I really thought Howard Rourke was this cool dude. But then my view of him would waver. For those people who don't know the story of The Fountainhead, Howard Rourke believed his design was the best, almost to the detriment of what his client wanted.
No, that is a stupid way to live and work.
Okay, and that's what you see what I'm getting at, right?
Juvenile.
Yeah, you see what I'm getting at, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
How do you avoid the Howard Rourke? You know,
No.
you presented it. You know, how do you avoid that?
You avoid it by listening.
Please talk.
That simple.
I want people to hear this.
Stop listening.
Mm-hmm.
You stop responding correctly. And the best advice, see, there's this misnomer in design that I see repeated routinely, and I would like to put this out in the world, that we have to educate our clients. First of all, your client is not a designer. That is not your job. You need to be educated by your client. They are the expert in their discipline. Now, that doesn't mean you should let your client walk over you just because they love the color red and want to use it in every headline. Because here's the thing, it also depends on your product. So again, for example, with Echem Expo, the end audience is a conference clientele. It's people that have paid and are showing up to learn and network in their industry, right? So the problems you are solving are for them. A lot of clients make the mistake that it's their personal preferences that you should adhere to. But that's a huge, huge mistake because you're solving for what you like, but aren't thinking about what your client needs. And I always remind my clients that. So if you're going to use that phrase, you have to educate your client. Perhaps it's that item. But you don't need to explain typography to them. You don't need to explain, you know, photo editing to them, which by the way is not design. That's a photographer's job, but et cetera, right? So, you know, we're also living in an era where I think a lot of novices don't understand the value of creatives, and it's not just designers. They're like, well, I can just automate that. I mean, sure, you can try, and maybe that's true if all you're making is a suite of social assets. Yeah, maybe. But the reality is, in my experience, the solutions generated by automation are pretty middling, and they're not going to like make you a leader. They're just going to make you a follower in your industry.
So I want to get your reaction to this because I don't believe it's possible to develop AI that's smarter than a person. Is that essentially what you're saying?
Here's the thing. There are some things that AI excels in, and there's a reason why it's called machine learning. I think we need to think real hard because AI is the word that's used colloquially, like with amongst like peer-to-peer, like regular folk, right?
Yep.
And I'm not an expert in machine learning. Obviously, if I was, I would have a house, not an apartment in West Hollywood, right? So, but the real talk is it's great when you need data and you need to aggregate data. But I will put the warning out that nobody will listen. It's full of bias.
Yep.
And
100%.
it's dangerous because people can manipulate data. And it's not to say people can't manipulate data without machine learning. They've been doing it. They will continue to do it, right?
Yep.
It just, now they can do it in record back-breaking speed, right?
Yeah.
So as an anecdotal example, and I will preface this with, it is in fact anecdotal, but I was talking with one of my contemporaries who's a fellow designer. She's a little bit younger than me. We're great friends. And I said, Chrislam, I need you to try something for me. Go over to ChatGPT and tell it the following. And I'd like everybody else to try this too, if they're listening today or find this later. Render a photo of me based on everything you know. Now, this is also, I will preface this with, you have to be a regular user of ChatGPT, right? So it's got to have a record of what you talk to it about. So if you are, tell it to render an image of you based on everything it knows about you. And tell me what it comes back with. But I'll tell you what it came back for me and Chrislam. For me, it came with a young man, not one image, two images of young men as designers in a design studio. I asked Chrislam to do it. Same. But because her name's Chrislam, which I would like to preface this with, she's Korean, it rendered an Indian young man.
Whoa.
We're both senior designers. She's in fact a senior educator at Mount SAC, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in charge of her program. And we asked it, like, why are you assuming that we're men? And it said, well, based on my data, most leaders in your field are men. These kind of thought models are dangerous. We're already in a world where we're marginalized.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well
I'll
said.
just leave it at that. Like, I'm not going to like sit here and educate people
Right.
because that's,
No, you're well. You're
I'm not
absolutely
an
right.
expert, so I'm not inclined to do that. But I will just put the warning out there.
Mhm.
If you're using it for creative things, be careful what results you take out in the world. And again, you can't copyright something built in artificial intelligence. So if you're using AI in Canva or ChatGPT or Midjourney, I could go on and on and on, Claude,
Mm-hmm.
you don't own that.
That's right. They do.
So, you know, you need to think about the implications for your business long term. And listen, I'm a practical person, Zennie. If
Mm-hmm.
you are starting a business and you're bootstrapping it, you're going to do whatever you need to get by. And I'm here to support you. You don't have to hire me. You may not be able to afford me, and that's fine. You know, like, I'm not mad about that at all. Like, I'm not here to convince you to like throw all your money at me, because it might not be a good ROI for you while you explore if your business is viable.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get to a certain stage and you're profitable, you need to re-examine those branding assets because you need to own them.
Yeah. That's excellent advice. And speaking of which, I'm curious to know what it was like to work for another creative in a sense, and that's Cheech Marin. And I go to this, just open the discussion with this awesome book.
Yeah, these books are several years old now, but they're still like a point of pride for me. I was brought in to work with Cheech's collection by his art manager, Melissa Richardson Banks, who I have like a deep, long-standing friendship and affection for. She's lives in Houston now. She's still an amazing supporter of the arts and works closely with Cheech. Now, I don't know if people know this, and this is again an aside, a diversion. Sorry, I'm ADD. But Cheech's collection now lives in its own museum in Riverside County called the
Wow.
Cheech. It took over a mid-century library building. And now you can go visit Cheech's rotating collection
I'm
anytime you
sorry.
want.
Ooh, fun fact. One of the people that was instrumental in having that done was one of my best friends and longtime friends, John Russo, who at the time was Riverside city manager.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm sure we've met. We would have met in passing.
I will connect you all after.
That'd be delightful. I'm always excited to meet those Riverside leaders because they're really motivated to make their city leadership for the arts.
Yeah. He and I talked about this on how could I have been so brainless? He and I talked about this on another video. So you want to talk about other perspective and other, stuff that makes you pan zoom at the same time. It's one of those moments.
Yeah, I mean,
wow.
Listen, I'll say to that, like Riverside is a fair distance from LA proper, where I am, but it's worth the drive to anybody who lives in LA County. But LA art scene isn't as big as you think. Like you're gonna find a lot of like the same players talking with each other, working with each other, conferring with each other. Anyway, this spread is not the cover of this book. This is the open spread. This was a volume for a touring show called Los Tejanos. And these were primarily Mexican-American artists that lived in Texas. So this work was to be a companion to that traveling show.
And there's another one that comes with this, and I'll put it up now. And there's something you want to add to the other one. You can always go back to that. We call this Cheech Marin 2. This one?
Yeah, this is an earlier volume called Papel Chicano Dos. I did not do the initial volume of Papel Chicano. But yeah, this is a really, again, it was a touring show. Yeah. This book was definitely trial by fire. We learned a lot about how to organize our publication projects from this particular project, me and Melissa. It was really, really great fun. And you can see the underwriters of this are quite established. And take note, this is a very early book. You'll see RAM, which is the Riverside Art Museum, was an underwriter of this project, as was the Philbrook. And there are a few other notable sponsors here on this list. So, but really, really fun, incredible artists.
And there is another one that goes with that, and that is this one.
Any of the other images you have will be Los Tejanos for the books.
Okay. That would be share screen. We would call it Cheech Marin. This one. No, we already did that one. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think you got a cover and a couple of artist spreads.
Right. Let me pick out. So it's 1, 2. Oh, wait. How did I did that too? Or did I do this twice? And no, I did not. There we go. Got it. There. That's it.
Yeah, that is the cover for Los Tejanos.
That's it. So, yes, that's it.
Yeah, I don't know that either Los Tejanos or Papel Chicano Dos exist in forms you can order. You might be able to order a volume secondhand. They were very limited production runs to go along with the traveling exhibition. However, reach out to me or Melissa, and if we get enough interest, perhaps we'll run another edition.
Let me ask a dumb question. Was it intentional to have this as if you're walking on the street and you see this sign? Because I see that in this, and then I see it in the first photo that we did where you're walking onto this streetscape and you see this building, right?
I can't say that it was Zennie, but what was important to me is that the cover be cohesive of the work in its entirety as much as possible, which is impossible because of the aspect ratio of the cover. But what you're seeing here is a continuous wrap minus the spine, of course, of this one single work. But we felt this work was most representative of Los Tejanos, as this is a street scene. in
Oh,
Texas,
so I
right?
don't lose
So
people. When you say continuous wrap minus the spine, can you explain what
y-
that means to a layperson?
sure, sure. So what you're seeing here in this screen grab here is you're seeing the front cover of the book with the title and the title treatment, and then the image just behind it is the back of the book.
Mm.
So this image continues. So if you were to lay the spine flat, the spine's the orange line to the left, right?
Hmm.
If you were to lay this flat, you'd see the continuation of this entire painting,
Wow.
or the majority of the painting. It's a detail because the aspect ratio of the cover is not identical to the original painting, right? In a perfect world, you would have a painting that's the same size as the cover, right? But
Mhm.
we're not here to be prescriptive. These are fine artists, so we work with what is in the collection.
It also almost has this, from a urban planning background, it has this feeling of a statement or urban planning. Not that it's intended to be by any means, but
Mhm.
it's almost like a love affair for a certain type of urban look, you know?
Well, inside Los Tejanos, which I think I have a copy of it over here. Yeah, it's right here.
Mhm.
And I can actually show you. Yeah, I keep all my books in one place for just this reason, should I ever have to um, discuss it. But, you know, you can see like this continues across the cover, right? So
Wow. Yeah.
that's the intent, right?
Wow.
And
Yeah.
interestingly enough, although I can't say I thought of it at the time. Oh, look. This is a nice little touch. This is my signed copy by the man himself. Look at that. Lovely.
Gee, what's he like?
Um, yeah,
What's
he's a delight. So there you
Does
go.
he tell a lot
But
of jokes? Is he what's he like in person? Because you would think, one person, I've only seen him on television. That's the only Cheech I know.
Cheech is the smartest person you don't know. Yeah.
Whoa,
He's
you've got to explain that. That is a hell of a
well, you know, most people
wow.
don't know him, right? But
Right.
I've had the pleasure of being in the same room with him and uh his family any number of occasion. I've had the privilege. And he's smart, thoughtful, uh funny. He's funny in real life. He's not one of those comedians that's miserable personally, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he's a delight. Yeah, I'm always happy to be in his company, which doesn't happen often. And even when I work on the books, you know, we might meet once or twice over the course of a book, because really that's managed by another team. So um yeah, and so the same book, right? So this is the open spread of
Wow.
this book, right?
Beautiful.
So also kind of echoing the urban cover, right?
Hmm.
So
Beautiful.
yeah, yeah, and this is Jacinto Guevara, really brilliant.
Wow.
Yeah, this book is full of now what are considered, you know, well, first of all, Cheech changed the collecting landscape for Chicano art. When he first started, LACMA wouldn't take a meeting with him. They wouldn't meet with him
Why?
because Chicano art was not considered fine art.
Why?
There was no collector base for it. Cheech
Whoa.
was really like the leader. He changed, you know, artists' lives by advocating for them. Like Cheech,
In other words, this is racism.
yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that, but I really just think that the establishment hadn't acknowledged that this culture was a thing.
Huh.
So it was really more of like just kind of like precedent, like over culture. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it does. It does. Yeah, it does. It does.
And like in many cases, museums are quite pedantic, right? So I'll leave the museum unnamed, but there is a museum somewhere in this country that shows Latin art, and they didn't want it to work in their museum either because they're like, oh, well, these are Americans, right?
Huh. Huh.
So, you know, it's it's a curious place to be. But now, of course, that's completely changed. That museum ultimately ended up having a huge show dedicated to Cheech's collection, to their credit. You know, it just took a curator change, and that was that. So, and you know, now Cheech's collection sits alone by itself as a testament to the culture.
Wow.
And I'm kind of, I'll be quite frank, like I'm quite
Yeah.
sensitive to the fact that I'm a average white person and I'm involved in projects, but I am not the only person involved in these projects, right? There
Mhm.
are a whole like laundry list of artists and contributors to these projects that don't look like me. So I just happen to be a cog in the machine. And I'm a huge advocate of underserved art communities. Like, to me, it's so crucial to acknowledge something beyond the Western art education that most of us received. I'll never forget the first time I went to MoLA, which is the Museum of Latin Art in Los Angeles. I was like, wow, who are these artists? I didn't know any of the names any, and it ranged the gamut. It was painters, photographers, right? And I'm like, why don't I know any of these names? And then I thought back a little bit critically, and I'm like, oh, because I grew up with, study of Western civilization
Mhm.
art, right? That it really was called Survey of Western Art. And I did have Survey of East Asian Art in the defense of everyone involved. Like, but it was its whole discipline, right? And I don't remember there being any other culture aside from East Asian and Western. That's what I learned at university. I don't remember there being any other classes at that point in history, which is in the 90s,
Hmm.
surveying any other culture, which is
Wow.
wild,
Yeah.
you know, because there's
Particularly when you
all
consider
these crucial,
right,
crucial art movements.
right, and also they're expressed in cooking now. And to add what you're saying, I, to be honest, didn't know anything about West African cuisine until I happened to see, of all things, a credit card commercial featuring Michael, excuse me, uh, the gentleman who starred in Black Panther alongside the late Chadwick Boseman, uh, talking about Jeffrey rice in Africa. I didn't know there were different types of rice, and it took a
Sure.
commercial, right, for me to
Mm-hmm.
become interested in something that harkens to where I don't know if they're my ancestors, because apparently part of my background is Ethiopian, but it's close. All right.
Mm-hmm.
If in thought, if not geography, but the whole point is, you're absolutely right. There's we get shown a particular part of the world's creativity that tends to be European or Asian, and little else. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And I do see that, at least here in Los Angeles, not being the case. There are any number of survey classes, whether it's in Chicano movements or other, like more like, and the fact that East Asian was like a semester, Zenny, that covers India, China, Japan. Each of those places deserves like semesters, plural,
mhm.
right? So it's absurd to lump those all into one thing and maybe pull 40 artists from those massive diasporas,
Oh, and
right?
by the way, the actor I was thinking was Michael B. Jordan. Uh,
Sure,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the actor. And
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
go ahead.
I don't know if you saw that movie because there's a lot of like contemporary conversations about diversity and the value of it, Cindy.
Yeah.
And I would encourage everybody that's on the fence about this to watch a movie called City of Gold.
Oh, I
And
haven't heard of it. Tell us
it's
about it.
brilliant. It's for foodies. I'll be the first to admit it,
Oh,
but
good.
it's
I'm in.
accessible. Yeah, it's accessible. It's
Wait, did you mean edible?
no.
I couldn't
It's
resist.
it's it's about Jonathan Gold, who was the food writer for the LA Times for decades,
Hmm.
right? And but he makes this great statement about LA, and he's like, there is this misnomer that LA is a melting pot. That is false. LA is a mosaic full of these great, wonderful cultures that you can literally go drive a few miles and experience, right?
Hmm.
Even
Mhm.
in my own neighborhood, Zenny, within 4 miles any direction, I could go to Little Ethiopia, south of the museum, meeting LACMA, my local museum. I can go another couple miles down Wilshire, past Little Ethiopia, and I'm in Koreatown. If I keep going to the San Gabriel Valley, I will have more Chinese culture than I know how to experience, right? To me, I'm a small town kid. I come from, what is termed as flyover country, because it is. It doesn't even have an airport, okay? So
Wow.
when I moved to LA and had the privilege of experiencing basically a world tour by living in a city, why don't you enjoy this? You should get out of your comfort zone, stop going to chain food restaurants. You don't need another CPK dinner. I'm not here to judge you. You do whatever makes you happy, but I'm gonna tell you right now, go eat some street tacos, go to Little Ethiopia, go have Korean barbecue. And if you're the only white person in the restaurant, you went to the right place. You did it right.
Awesome. Now we come to Vincent Valdez.
Sure.
Tell us about
that's
this.
part of Los Tejanos.
This is part of Los Tejanos, yes. And
yeah, I strongly encourage people to go read about Vincent Valdez. Really seminal artist in the Chicano movement.
And this is that part of, when I look at that, let me ask you another dumb, not dead. Yeah. Is this part of the Day of the Dead? It looks like.
Yeah, there's often cultural references in Chicano art, obviously, to this crucial part of their culture. You'd have to speak, you'd have to look back in the history of Vincent to see if he'd done any writing on this particular piece. He probably has. I'm sorry, I'd have to go look in the book to tell you the exact name of this piece. I have a terrible memory. But yeah, definitely Vincent. I think it was Vincent Valdez. Please don't quote me on this, and if I'm wrong, I'll be horrified. But I think it was Vincent Valdez who emulated the Stations of the Cross, but with a boxer. And it's one of my favorite series ever done within Cheech's collection. It's I think it's pencil on paper. It might be in this book. Let me see, Zennie.
Sure. Let's see.
I think that might actually be in Works on Paper. So let's see if it's in here. Yeah. Oh yeah, this is signed by many of the artists in this show. I'm really. Oh yeah, So
whoa.
These, if you ever have the privilege and you see that these are going to be on exhibition anywhere in your orbit, you must go see them.
Whoa.
Yeah. So again, this is Vincent echoing the Stations of the Cross, but from a boxer's vantage. Really, really moving.
That is something else. This is a fantastic education, and not only that, hey folks, we're far from done, because I want you to see next. This reminds me, for some particular reason, I don't know why this makes me think of David Lynch, but it does. Henry Palooza.
Oh, that's an interesting. I would have never made this parallel in any form or fashion with this particular piece. This one, again, is very client driven. I wish I had the presence of mind to send you all the lead up concepts for this project, but this one is fun, but simple.
It looks fun.
Yeah, so this project is for Henry Samueli. This is for his private 70th birthday party at the House of Blues in Anaheim. Henry Samueli is the what's the proper term? The overreaching superpower of OCVIBe. He is the visionary behind that project. So yeah, this project, of course,
OCVIBe is the 100-acre entertainment center in Orange County.
It's a huge development that will surround Honda Center and Angel Stadium down there. Right.
Wow.
So it's going to be concert halls and living and offices. Like, it's massive. It's got a 10-year projection. Is that right? Maybe it's less.
It's huge.
Maybe it's 7.
I actually looked at I went to find some information about it, so I found something I think I can show everybody without getting into copyright trouble. But for images, and here's here is an article that I can post from OC Register, which will give you a taste of what he was talking about. And yeah, this actually is a perfect photograph to feature here, to give everybody a view. This one right here, folks, is right there. This is from the Orange County Register. Oh no, they put a paywall behind it.
Boo. But there's plenty of
Paywalls.
information out there about it.
Yeah, and so it's there. It is. You can see that before the paywall comes up, folks. There's the image of it, and there's the paywall.
Anyway,
doing you guys a favor, dudes. But anyway,
yeah, I have so many like visualizations. I just can't share them with you, Zennie, because they're internal. So they probably wouldn't care, but I'm not going to get in any hot water.
Absolutely.
So.
Now that brings us to what is an incredibly exciting work and wonder of a creation. Before the other incredibly exciting work and wonder of creation, and that's this one for OCVIBe. Countdown.
Oh yeah, this is the latest.
Eva.
I appreciate it. Thank you. So, my influences are broad and varied, but I how can I put this? I routinely like have in my head like certain art movements that are the most interesting to me, and this one aligns. I have this really strong fascination with Russian constructivism and the Bauhaus. So this poster is probably largely influenced by the latter, but this is a challenging project because, again, you have to please a lot of stakeholders, number one. And number two, you can't be overly prescriptive because these spaces don't exist yet. We have plenty of renderings and we got a pretty good idea what they're going to look like in real life, but there's no rational logic between being hyper realistic with the rendering. This is probably about as close to like fine art as a corporate piece ever gets, right? So because what it's doing is it's leveraging the brand along with a vision for the future of the project. So in this rendering, of course, you see some kind of allusions to California with the palm trees and the clouds and the sunny colors, which are in fact part of the brand palette. The interesting thing about OCVIBe's brand, which I did not develop, this was done by Hale Design, to credit the right person. So, is that it has a day and night treatment. So these dark blues are like for nighttime, where the entertainment district at OCVIBe's, is going to bring a life to that part of the city. And of course, the daytime palette is the golds, the oranges, right? The orange is the crucial key brand color overall, for obvious reasons, because OCVIBe's, Orange County. So yeah, but this is in fact kind of a marriage of the two, but it's more about the structures. So this piece references 3 crucial structures. One is going to be called the Cloud Bar, which is this building that seems to levitate, which it almost does in real life, because in real life you can pass underneath this building and it's counter-levered to a building on the right, in the renderings. And then the building behind that is residential. And then that seemingly unconnected undulating wave at the top is an art piece that's going to be installed on the concert hall, which is full of these, like, I'm guessing on materials because I haven't seen. Why would I? Because it's not my job. But it looks like these big aluminum plates meant to replicate sheet music that are undulating across the face of the building. It's very cool. So
You said Bauhaus, and my brain locked, and I went all the way. You catapulted me all the way back to architecture school at Texas Arlington from 1985 to 1980. No, excuse me, 19. What am I talking about? 1980. Come on, see, 1980 to 1985. That was my undergraduate years, and a man who became one of my favorite architects, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. And so, and there was Walter Gropius, and yeah, and I was in love with those architects in that period, in that style. So, and it's classified as functional, folks. So, I guess it's best to say that this is your aim was functionality. Then,
yes, I mean the whole precipice of Bauhaus artistry and architecture and product design, which, you know, people didn't think of product design back then. It wasn't a term they used, but is form follows function.
mm-hmm. Yep.
That's the edict. So basically, you can think of it this way: the teapot has to work, and once it works, then you can explore form.
Yeah, and the engineering's got to be just right. That's it.
Yeah, you don't do it in the reverse. You don't make something just for aesthetics and then try and make it work. And I have to say, that's actually how design should operate. And that's how I usually, especially if I'm doing a more technical document, like right now I'm working on the education manual. That's not correct. It's a marketing piece. So the education brochure for the museum, right? Which basically inventories any class you can take at the museum through the rest of 2025, right? So in that case, it's aligning like every piece of data, because that's coming from all different education departments within the organization, right? Children's, adult, continuing ed programs, right? Exhibition programs. So, you know, those people like submit stuff in various formats. So it's aligning all those formats, making sure the information's always in the same sequence: title, description, price, age range, details, right? Like aligning all of that. I'm not trying to make something beautiful in my first pass. I'm trying to make sure all the information is clear and concise to the end reader who's going to receive the marketing piece, right? Then in the later versions, that's when you start digging in and making it aesthetic.
The other side of memory.
This is a great project. If you ever have the chance to see Luis Garza's work in person, he's a photographer. He was part of the Chicano rights movement in the 60s and 70s.
I remember hearing about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Several museums own his work now, including Riverside Art Museum, who did a retrospective on his work recently, but they do own pieces. And what's that museum owned by the Waltons in Arkansas? It's a huge.
Let me look it up real quick.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like, I'm just blanking.
No,
anyway, they.
Let's find out. Walton's.
Crystal Bridges. That's
Crystal.
it.
Oh, better than me. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it took me a second to pull it from my gray matter.
Oh,
so Crystal Bridges acquired several of his pieces recently. I don't know, like, I'm not in charge of acquisitions, but yeah, he's been progressively acquired by more and more collectors and museums. He's owned by several notable collectors. But I would say Luis would be most classified as an activist / street photographer. That would be how I would categorize him. He's a good friend of mine. And truly a delight. He's amazing, full of stories. Like, he will tell you.
This design is timeless. It really is.
Yeah, it's just a really, really great book. Yeah, and it's just a really important slice of activist history. So I can't recommend finding Luis out in the world. wherever you can. So plenty of interviews. He's done plenty of interviews. You can go listen to him tell stories.
Now, speaking of interesting people and interesting work, we also come to this. Well, it's actually behind me. Boom.
Oh, that is part of Los Tejanos.
That's me.
Yeah, that's Carlos Don Juan. Mm-hmm.
And talk to us about Carlos Don Juan, please.
I wish I could like give you like some clip notes behind. Again, like all of these artists I have like documentation of somewhere in my archive, but from my personal art appreciation society over here, which is party of one, I really enjoy Carlos Don Juan's work because it's deeply surreal. And I know that he's making cultural references always. You can see that like he's very contemporary, right? By the clothing worn by his subjects. But yeah, do I have any more Carlos? They don't always look like this. If you do some due diligence for like looking up Carlos Don Juan, you won't regret it. He's wildly interesting. In fact, actually, maybe I do have a quick little bio on him. Let me see if he's in Papel Chicano.
Okay.
If not, he'll be in Los Tejanos. So
okay.
But yeah, we always include a bio of every artist. We don't just make picture books, right? Mm-hmm. So let's see. Oh yeah. So according to the documents, he's born in 82, so he's younger than I am. Mm-hmm. So got that going for him. And he resides in Dallas now, but he is actually from Mexico. But it says here, his work draws upon the diverse idea of people who wear many masks while living in America to create and understand their identity. I honestly can't think of any person's work potentially right now that's more prescient than Carlos's work, right? With our current climate. Yeah, I'm just scanning this survey on him. Yeah, that's technique. Yeah, so anyway, yeah, if you just go to carlosdonjuan.com, you'll learn everything you need to know about his works are quite large, actually. So
now your next client happens to be one of my favorite artists, and what I'm about to present to you is just breathtaking. And this is what Eva did for the legendary Gwen Stefani.
Yeah, so I did not work directly with Gwen. I wanted to quantify this like with deep clarity. OCVIBe contracted Gwen to play a Honda Center anniversary. It was their 30th anniversary. So they brought me on to ideate at the time. We didn't actually know what we were going to make. I mean, they thought they did. It was supposed to be like a whole bunch of merch. But then Gwen's team effectively said, well, we don't really feel comfortable with that because we have our own merch and we're like promoting this new album, right? So we couldn't really like do what the executive marketing team initially wanted to do. So what ended up happening is this ended up being more of a public relations tool instead of a merchandising tool. So at the end of the day, they printed 21,000 posters for this sold out concert to give to every single person who came to Honda Center to see this show. So, it was this huge labor of love for the community. Now, of course, the beers didn't come free. Those went through Brewery X. And this was, again, to align. And I also did environmental, like, signage for this project where people could do their photo op with the graphics, right? And adjusted the graphics so they would work in that capacity, which is a routine task. The Henry Palooza thing was like that too. There are so many assets, Zennie, for the Palooza project. There are t-shirt graphics. There's hyper banners, right? That's not the right term, but massive banners that wrapped the inside of the House of Blues, right? All like kerchiefs. We made custom kerchiefs with a different graphic, with like a record on it. I mean, it just went on and on and on. Like that folder is full of so many assets. I've just never collected it into a single portfolio exhibition, mostly because I'm terrible at updating my portfolio, shamefully. And second, I don't exactly have permission to publish it, so I do need to reach out and get that. And I still need photographs of the event itself. But so for the Gwen project, this is a project that almost didn't happen because of the initial problem with merchandising. And the second issue was the first draft was really referential to Tragic Kingdom, which is also an album roughly about the same age as Honda Center, right? So that there is a video that went along with that where Gwen is holding up an orange. And I'm pretty sure the director knew exactly what he was doing by referencing Gwen's roots, because she was born and raised in Orange County. She's a local girl, right? So anyway, so my first poster design referenced that directly, and it had, you know, this kind of same style hand pointed up with the orange in front of Honda Center. Like it was really prescriptive, right? It was great. It was really beautiful. It kind of had an Art Deco look. It was a little bit different than this one that feels more like 90s. To me, this poster is very referential again to what I don't know if the 90s have been given a design term, but the interesting thing about design,
because the 80s have, right?
What?
Because the 80s have.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I always think of I'm not, I assume that somebody has like given it a proper term, but I always think of the 80s a little bit like DIY design, right? There's a lot of photocopying and handmade handbills and cut and paste, but the 90s, as primitive computer technology entered the design ecosystem, really took on a different caliber and tone and like feeling. But you could look at 80s design and a lot of it is straight up punk rock, hand drafted, photocopied, collaged, right? But the 90s took it like one bridge further. And I'll censor myself. So whether I enjoy the work or not, David Carson was part of the architecture of 90s design. And he published Ray Gun magazine. And he'll be the first person to tell you he didn't know anything about design when he started publishing Ray Gun magazine. And so he just did whatever he wanted. Now, I will mention this fact because I come from a very formalist background. My teacher that really influenced me in college was Polish. And he had a very strict idea about design and form following function. Like he really like was part of that Eastern Bloc pure design, design for function. Whereas the 90s did not care about function.
Right.
It was irrelevant.
Right.
It was so much slapdash. Everything's moving hyperspeed. We're going to make a Flash website that nobody knows how to navigate. It doesn't matter because everybody just needs to look cool. The 90s were about quote unquote looking cool at the expense of everything else.
Yeah,
right?
which I could not stand.
Well, there were people
that,
and it's funny. There's a real division between designers who are old enough to remember it. Some people are like, I just feel like I don't have any freedom anymore.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
But
now, I have to
explain.
What I meant real quick is that I entered a contest when I was in high school to develop a design for Oakland City Hall Plaza. And of all the designs that were entered, the one that won literally could not be built. It was total
Yeah.
Whereas I got honorable mention.
Yeah.
And then as Oakland City Hall Plaza was being built, I noticed that there was this zigzaggerate design that were steps. And I thought, wait a minute. I know. And I thought, holy cow, that's from my design at Skyline High. And the architect, Yuhei Lee, admitted he took that from my design.
Right.
And I to this day, anyway, but I had to present that. And because it was functional. It worked.
Yes.
There you go.
But for me, I had the opposite feeling. When the like reckless abandon of the 90s ended, I felt freer. Because I was like, oh, I can finally, and I just refused to design a website in the Flash era. I just didn't want anything to do with it, Zennie. And I'll be the first person to admit I actually tried to learn Flash multiple times. I was like, I am not interested in this at all. Like this has no, the closest I got to being like the 90s designer was I did make a lot of interactive CD-ROMs, and those really were like, there was no rhyme or reason. We weren't talking about branding, Zennie. We were just being cool. Like that was all that mattered, because they were giving these things away at trade shows, and I'm like, oh, look how future forward we are, But now we look at it and we're like, it's funny. I did run across like a pile. Like I found 3 of the old interactive CD-ROMs that I made, and it really made me laugh. I remember one had like a carnival theme, Zennie, and like the whole cover of the CD-ROM was a guy. It was like a stock image of a guy lifting barbells. I don't know. It was for like some corporate companies, and it was so like out of nominal, right?
Yeah.
Like we'd never do that now. It was so crazy. I mean, I will say that I think a lot of creative agencies internally are a slave to brand guides. And there is a time and a place to be more interesting. And I would encourage executives to give more freedom to their creative departments to explore those. I mean, if that makes sense.
Yeah, when you talk about Flash, I'm reminded of something I really hated when I was trying to explain to people why they're thought that because it was Flash automatically and produced a nice picture, it wouldn't automatically be found on search engine.
Nobody thought about that stuff then. It was just, I'm telling you.
No one got it. I was like,
I'm not saying you
but
didn't.
I was like, but
I never, ever, ever. Again, I was not in that industry. I was not doing any web work for clients at all. None. I just was not interested. And I was at that time in my history, I was in a different field altogether. I wasn't strictly, I had always been a designer, but strictly for other creatives up until I decided to pivot, right? And become, and it was challenging because I did carry some of that reckless 90s abandon into some of my early corporate work, and they did not align. Like I was not listening enough to my clients. I was trying to impose my own design philosophies, even though I did come from a pretty pragmatic background, right? So,
so that was those are your Howard work days, huh?
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, we all get that bite, but at the time, and I'm thinking of 1999, I was head executive director of the Oakland Alameda County Sports Commission, the Super Bowl 39 bidding committee, and I needed a website, and I was gonna. This is why everything was brand new then. I was gonna use. I wound up using Adobe. No, Microsoft. I forgot it was Microsoft out of the box. But at any rate, there was a woman whose name I will not mention, whose company I will not mention, who quoted me a price of $143,500 for a website. And the proposal, Eva, was on one page with like, you can't see the page, I don't think, but it had one little paragraph about yay big. And I had to take a microscope and like that. I mean, what is a lens, right? Magnifying lens to read it. And that's what we expected to get. Here, I'm representing the city of Oakland, and I'm supposed to present this to my boss, and they're supposed to present this to like procurement. No way.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's some really crazy stuff.
Are just shocked to know like the anarchy And you have to understand like the history of design to understand how we even got to the 90s, right? So you have to understand like for young designers now, it's almost impossible to believe because design has been so commoditized and marginalized. But there was a time that advertising was king and designers were leaders. Like they really were culture leaders. And that whole like Mad Men
That's what I was
thing
thinking
was
of.
real.
Yeah.
It was real. Now it was largely men that were the architects of tastemaking. I used to work with a guy who was not much younger than Don
We never
Draper would
just. So you
be.
love Mad Men, then you like the TV show for that reason?
Well, there is this phrase that is vintage style, not vintage values,
Mm-hmm.
that I adhere to. And I think most of my friends, I would say all of my friends adhere to. If they don't, they need to come clean now so we can part ways. But like as a female, like being a professional is always challenging because there is always going to be a certain segment. And this is why I actually left the Midwest, because I found it difficult to be taken seriously in what I was doing. And I have no doubt that there are people in the more metropolitan areas of the Midwest, but I was not, right? I lived in a college town with a pretty small actual 365 days a year person population, that people live there year round. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say it's any easier to move to a huge city and start over, but you have two choices. One, you just go with the flow and, you know, get as far as you can get, or you take a leap and see what happens, right? So I chose the latter personally. The place I live now aligns more with my creative needs. It aligns more with my personal values, and I found more contemporaries that are interested in the things I'm interested in, right? So,
Hey, so tell everybody how a prospective client can get a hold of you, because
oh,
folks
you
need
can,
to hire Eva
yeah,
today.
well, after we talk, after an email exchange, I will literally give you my phone number and, we'll schedule a call, right? Like I always start every single client project with a personal call. It's not, it's so funny. Like I just engaged with a new client. It's a very small project. I'm kind of mostly doing it for like karma, if that makes sense. Every once in a while, I like to help out a small business for like very
Yeah.
little money just to help them like feel comfortable and get their project started. And
For the record, we paid Eva.
yeah, it's true. But you know what I mean? Like I like to do a solid for fellow like people, so fellow creatives, periodically. I don't have a lot of energy to do that, but when I can, I do. But yeah, so I have a form on my website. You can just send that. You can email me. Zennie can put my email address up. I do not gatekeep that. Just freaking email me. Delighted to have a conversation, and tell you if I think we're a good fit. Or you can tell me if we're a good fit. That's probably more accurate.
Here's a website.
Yeah, you can just find me. I am so easy to find. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, the Axis of Eva, and it tells you who she is and how to get a hold of her. Eva, and not only that, it shows her work. If you scroll down, that's the work we're
I will
talking
say
about.
it's a fair bit dated, but there's some good stuff on there.
And look at that. I mean, and I'll say it again. To me, when I think of Los Angeles, I think of you, Eva,
Well, I
because
appreciate that. I mean,
yeah,
long term, I would love to be thought of that way, where I am like a product of my environment.
mm-hmm.
Uh, I've always tried to honor the LA spirit. I have long discussed about like what appeals to me about Los Angeles. And this is often like a very alien question to people who live in the Midwest. Like when they ask me that, they're literally mystified why I would choose to live in a place full of people and traffic and in their minds like horrible crime, which is, I'm just gonna say right, that is just a wild misnomer. people from the Midwest, like, it's safer to live in Los Angeles now than it was 15 years ago. Our crime rate continues to decline. Anyway, that aside, for me, I can always go find something to inspire me in the city. Always. If you're not finding something interesting, it's because you're staying home, which I do a lot in the defense of everyone involved.
Hey,
right?
I gotta ask you, how is LA doing post fires?
I mean, there is a term called collective trauma for a reason. I consider myself deeply privileged. I did not lose the place I live in. However, many of my friends did. I've got friends in Altadena. I've got friends in the Palisades, right? They lost everything. They lost all their memories. They lost all the things that made them, like, I have many friends that are vintage collectors, right? My friend Jim lost his car, his vintage car. He lost his vintage trailer. He lost his house with all of his antiques. Like, and I can hear, like, some people in the peanut gallery be like, oh, well, they must have been rich. But Jim just worked freaking hard for all that stuff. Like, he was a working class person. He bought things when he could on the cheap. Those things ended up becoming really valuable over time. The car he inherited from his father. Like, he's not a rich guy, but he lost all of these things. Luckily, Jim's insured, and I hope his insurance company doesn't suck, and I hope they take care of him, right? Well, but his house was also, like, from the 1920s. He can't make that again, It was a little bungalow house with a back house. Again, I'm not talking like Jim had a 6,000 square foot. He didn't. Like, he had a regular person's house. Altadena was, historically speaking, not only an African-American neighborhood, but it was also a place where artists ended up migrating when the rest of the city became too expensive to live in, which generally everywhere in LA is too expensive to move into these days, right? It's hard. It's hard to be a startup in Los Angeles or a young person.
Something that we have to get that message to our governor and say, hey, look, but I think he knows.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, not to get into the weeds because I'm not an economist but you just can't shore up asset prices forever at the cost of everything else.
Yeah.
And, places like Los Angeles, New York, San Francisco have an endemic problem of outside investment, like elevating the cost of real estate for everyone else. So many of the properties in West LA just sit empty. They're just investment properties in the richest neighborhoods.
We got to have you back because we could talk forever. And I know
totally. I do have to get back to work, though. I got people waiting on me today.
This is a lot of fun. And folks, please give Eva's website a visit. Give her a call. Take her to coffee or dinner or lunch.
Yeah, I'll take a free coffee any day of the week. Let's go.
Right. Free dinner.
You don't have to upsell us any. Just get me that latte. That's all you got to do.
You got it. Folks, that concludes this wonderful conversation. Subscribe to Zennie62 on YouTube. Visit our website that Eva created the design logo for. I was going to have her do the website, but I ran out of bucks to pay her that part. So, hey, we got the logo part out of the way, right?
Yeah. So, if it's meant to happen, it'll happen.
You got it. But Eva, I want to thank you for being my friend, for creating a look for us that's timeless, and for all the contributions you've made to our culture. I know you don't think of it that way, but I hope you forgive me if I say that I do.
I do not, but I appreciate it. Yeah. Next time we'll talk about photography. I'm sure everybody noticed my shelf full of artifacts.
Yes, I have. Absolutely. Stick around in the background. Don't move a muscle. Folks, that ends this stream. Please, again, subscribe to Zennie62 and bookmark ZennieReport.com. We'll see you later.